Vesta was started back in 2012. We're celebrating 13 years this year. It's amazing. Great group of people. We're all here to help you get through this process, help you get unstuck, and be a resource for you. We do offer a concierge service. Mandy is one of our concierge members, and in the next day or so after tonight's webinar, she will be reaching out to check in on you, see if the webinar was helpful for you, and if you would like to be connected to any of us on the panel. Watch for Mandy's call. She will likely be emailing you as well. That's pretty much it. We're going to get started tonight. We're going to start off with just some quick introductions of everybody. I'm Renee Coleman. I am a residential mortgage lender and a certified divorce mortgage lender. And I'm here to help with your situation and help you get through it as your divorce as it pertains to your mortgage. Welcome. And I'm going to pass it over to Robin.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Robin Young. I'm a certified financial planner and managing partner of North Star Financial Planning, which is a wealth management firm with the specialty of helping men and women post-divorce. So, all the things that you need to do on the other side. So we'll be talking more about that in a while. Thank you.
Excellent. And Laura.
Good evening, everyone. Laura Gamache Real Estate Group of Keller Williams. I am licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. However, I work with agents all across the country and the world. I work with specifically a lot of married couples that are going through the divorce process. So men and females that are needing to make some big decisions around their home, whether someone's staying, going, or selling. So I will get into that more, but thanks for being here.
Thanks, Laura. Barbara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Barb Shigog. I am a certified divorce financial analyst. So I handle the financial aspects of a divorce. I work with the men and women clients pre-divorce. If someone comes to me and they want to start to get a handle on what the process would look like during divorce, and then helping you reach a settlement. And then I work closely with Robin post-divorce, making sure everyone's okay and settled. It's great too. There's a lot of numbers involved, and people find it really helpful to have an independent party just help them with that piece of it.
Thanks, Barb. Michelle.
Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Papandrea. I'm a certified divorce coach. I work with both men and women. My coach is a support person for you during and post-divorce, supports you through all aspects of the divorce, emotional, financial, and legal. But together, we mostly focus on the emotional pieces of divorce. As a coach, I'm your sounding board and thinking partner during this time of uncertainty so that you can make the best decisions for yourself.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And Crystal.
Hi, welcome. I'm Crystal Jenkins. I'm a certified paralegal and a certified family mediator. My job is to help you guys reach the agreement that you guys want to reach. So I work with everybody to make sure that you have informed decisions and get where you want to go.
Excellent. Thanks, Crystal. And last but not least, Kate.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Blake. I am a family law attorney. I am licensed in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire, but as Renee mentioned, tonight's focus is on New Hampshire. So when we talk more substantively, that is just going to be focused on New Hampshire. My practice encompasses helping people both with out-of-court resolution. So if you see Crystal as your mediator, I can give advice to one of the couple and help them in the background as they're going through divorce and ultimately looking at that agreement to make sure that it's fair and reasonable, that it addresses needs and concerns that you might have. Component of my practice is also collaborative law, which is a little bit more structured than mediation outside of court. I also do direct attorney negotiation, and then a component of my practice is also litigation.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. So that's our panel for tonight. One quick note, as Kate mentioned, we're talking about New Hampshire law tonight, but just for educational purposes, not to be considered legal advice. And the same applies to the financial advice and the real estate advice. It's advice, right? If you have a particular situation, we can always, all of us will offer a free consultation afterwards. Moving on, we're going to move to Michelle is going to start us off tonight, and take it away, Michelle.
So I am going to be starting with talking about communication. Next slide, please. So during separation and divorce, emotions and tension can run high, and communication is key. Your relationship with your spouse has changed, and you need to kind of change and adapt with those changes in your relationship, including how to communicate with each other. So as a coach, I can help you learn how to communicate differently, set new boundaries so that you're able to work through the legal, financial, and co-parenting aspects of the divorce. So one of the key things here is learning the BIF method of communication: brief, informative, friendly, and firm. I'm going to use texting as my primary means of communication. Keep it brief. Every text you receive doesn't, one, need a response, or two, need an immediate response. And be brief. Stick to the facts. If it's about the actual divorce or children, then, it probably will need a response at some point. Be informative and factual, leaving emotions out of it. Be friendly, civil, and firm. And firm goes back to talking about resetting your boundaries. Your relationship has changed now. You don't have the same level of access to each other any longer because your relationship has changed. As I said, communicate only when necessary. You can consider using an app like Family Wizard. I think that's usually you have to ask for that, or sometimes you can ask for that to be part of your agreement. Don't disparage your soon-to-be ex, especially in front of the kids. If you have children, they can internalize that. They see themselves as part of that other parent. And if you're speaking ill about that other parent, they can internalize that and take it personally. Take a time to pause and try not to be reactive. Like I said, some texts just don't need a response while you guys are working on how to communicate with each other differently than you used to. Some texts just don't need a response. Focus on your children and don't use them to communicate with the other parent. Things like, what are they up to?
It looks like Michelle has frozen.
Asking them question your parents.
Oh, there
Why
she
don't
is.
you- Oh no.
You froze for a second, but you're back now.
Where did I leave off?
Not to disparage, we heard.
Mhm.
To pause, we
Pause
heard.
and focus on the children and don't use them to communicate is what I was saying. So if you have a question of the other parent, ask the other parent. If you need to change the schedule, don't pry in on the other parent asking other questions. If you have a question, ask the parent. The children really, no matter what age they are, they do not like to be put in the middle. All right. Considerations when creating a parenting plan. Think about what's in the best interest of everyone involved, the kids and your lives, both parents. Things to think about: extracurricular commitments. If you want to sign a child up for camp or baseball, soccer, dance, talking to the other parent, making sure if you work Monday nights, also that you're not scheduling Monday nights as one of your nights to have the children. Proximity to each other, the school, the activities, homework facilitation, making sure that there's someone home, that the schedule works so that there's structure around homework, getting the kids to and from school, your work schedules. And then consider things like vacations, holidays, and school breaks. Can be the primary holidays, the secondary holidays. Say you're a teacher, you might want to ask for the secondary holidays because you don't work those holidays. Vacations, making sure that you're trying to put something in there as detailed as possible, like you each get 1 or 2 weeks a summer. And that way your plan is as detailed as possible so that everyone understands the expectations and routines. Oops. Here's a couple of parenting examples. These are just examples. It really is what you agree to as parents. Alternating weeks. It also depends on the age of the child, and you all know your children the best and what you think they can handle. Something that might work for a 15-year-old may not work for a 6-year-old. So the first one here is alternating weeks. Parent A has 1 week, and then parent B has the next week. 2255. So you can see here parent A has Monday and Tuesday, then parent B has Wednesday, Thursday, and then you go into 5 days or a long weekend. And then another popular one is 223. Parent A has Monday and Tuesday, parent B has Wednesday and Thursday, and then basically it's alternating weekends. So creating stability during and after the transition, and even while you're making your parenting plans, keeping traditions similar to what they were before. If you celebrate certain holidays, always say at your family's house, try to make that a consideration. If you take your family to a religious event every week, maybe that's one of the days that want to have parenting time, and try to keep that in the schedule. Initiate the child's contact, especially if they're younger, they don't have their own cell phones, with the other parent on a regular basis via whatever methods you guys choose. And I found it helpful to consider setting up a specific time so that the other parent knows, everybody knows really, say at 7 o'clock every night, especially during school nights, that you're going to set aside 15 minutes or so for the child to call the parent that, or the other parent that's not parenting at the time can call that parent. That way it allows uninterrupted time with the parent and child that are on schedule. And the anxiety sometimes, especially at the beginning, when you're not with your child and you really want to talk to them, this allows you that specific time. Maintain predictable schedules. Kids like schedules. They like predictability. Ensure smooth transitions by assuring the children that they support the relationship of the other parent. Like I said earlier, always trying to be positive, not disparage the other parent. Encourage the children to see the other parent and trust that the other parent is parenting appropriately. Follow similar routines as each other. That's co-parenting. There's also parallel parenting that I'm not diving into tonight. And then handle rules and discipline in the same way if you can. And even if you say you have a 13-year-old and you have taken their phone away as a form of discipline, trying to communicate with that other parent to uphold your discipline if, they're going to the other parent's house. But there may be different rules at different houses. Support contact with extended family. Specifically here, we're talking about grandparents. The grandparents get nervous as well that they will not be able to see the children and the children their grandparents, especially if they've been close. They could experience a sense of loss if they lose those close relationships with other family members. Be flexible. Try not to use your children as what they call weapons against the other parent. So be flexible. Schedules can change. Something special could be coming up. It could be the other parent's weekend, but you're celebrating your parents' 50th anniversary and you want them to come. When your kids are getting older, maybe it's prom and the daughter wants to be with one of the parents to get ready. Just be a little bit flexible with each other, because someday if you're not flexible, the other parent may not be flexible back. Give as much advance notice as possible to the other parent with any changes to the schedule. I usually recommend 48 hours at least, if not a week, depending what it is. Allow the children to carry important items back and forth between homes, although having as much of the same things at each house so the kids don't feel like they're packing a bag to go to the other parent's house is important. But there's always those special items like a teddy bear, a blankie, things like that. And try to plan vacations around your parenting plan and the kids' schedules. If you know that they have camp 1 week, obviously that's not a good week for vacation. If, say, they've got a big dance recital coming up or all-star baseball during the summer, make sure to plan around that. And I am a coach. I do not calculate alimony and child support.
Most of the time, I leave this up to the legal team and mediators to calculate, but my role in this would be to get the data to them. What do we need to calculate alimony and child support? If you're a W-2 employer or employee, then that's real easy. So we need pay stubs. Typically, it's the last 3 or 4 pay stubs. What's really important to also make sure you make people aware of is, do you get a bonus or do you have restricted stock options? So you may not have direct child support taken off of those, but they have to be considered. And in New Hampshire, you do have to disclose your income and also provide your tax returns. So if you don't own up to those and you just say, oh, my salary is X, then ultimately that will come back to haunt you. Really, the key is to make sure you disclose everything and how you get it. If you're an employer, if you're a self-employed, often we will go back to the tax returns, possibly look at the past couple years of income. But again, this is something that you'll work with your team to actually do the calculations. The tax returns are really critical, as well as the supporting documents. For example, you can see how much depreciation maybe you took or non-cash expenses that aren't true, didn't really impact the cash and the income that you have. If you have recently been laid off or you quit, the court can impute income to you, basically saying, hey, you can work and you should be working or try to get a job. Sometimes people feel like if I leave my job, then I'll get more child support. That isn't necessarily the case. The court can look at your ability to work. So that really wouldn't be a successful strategy if you're looking to get more child support. So the other thing is, and also it's a simple calculation relative to all the other data that you have to get. So it's income. The other thing that you'll have to have is what you pay for insurance for the children. So not maybe what you're paying today, but what you would pay in the future to cover the children if you're covering them. So the other piece, though, that's really important when you, in this calculation, is having an accurate budget. That's really critical because spousal support is a function of maybe a percentage of income, but it's also need and ability to pay. To demonstrate need is a really accurate budget. I know everyone hates doing budgets, but those are really critical when it comes to calculating spousal support. And if you're the payer, then it's also important to have that because you may say, look, I don't have the ability to pay this. Again, that's on spousal support. That's not as formulaic as the child support. And for child support, New Hampshire does, and I know Massachusetts does, there is an online calculator if people wanted to go out and put in the data to start to figure out what it might be. Obviously, I would suggest contacting someone, a mediator, a legal professional to help you to make sure you get it right. But there is, if you want to start to get an idea, you can go out onto, if you just Google it, you can see what it might be. I don't know if the legal team has anything else to chime in on that.
I think we'll cover what we want to cover when we get to it.
Yeah, so you can flip to the next slide. Michelle, I don't know if this is your piece.
I can certainly take it. Sure.
Yeah.
So emotional blocks when discussing support. So some people paying the support think they're paying too much. So if we're talking child support, it's a calculator. So I'll let the lawyer and such, the lawyers take that piece. I'm pretty sure that a calculator is a calculator. So as long as you're putting in everything that was just discussed into the calculator, and then it is what it is. I'll let Kate speak to that. Most people receiving support think they're not getting enough. Again, it's a calculator. I believe Alimony is a calculator as well. I'll let the rest of the team speak to that. But typically in a coaching session, I'll also coach that it's child support. It's for your children. And I think later in the slides, we'll talk about extra things on top that need to be covered outside of child support. I think I already brought up like camps and sports and dance and all of those things that might be extra. And the awarding of spousal and child support, it's a business, it's a calculator, it's done legally. So there's a lot of emotion around it, whether it's I made this money or I deserve this, it's calculated. And it's the law. I think that the legal team on the call will cover it a little bit better. But there's a lot of emotions around money.
Yeah, I can attest to on the financial side, everyone always feels this way, that they're not getting enough or that it's a normal feeling to.
And how am I gonna, and how one of the biggest questions is how can we even separate or divorce and pay for two households? And it is difficult, but several of us here would work with you through budgets, right? Budgets, mortgage, things that will help you make the best decisions for yourself and maybe what you need going forward.
Okay. So understanding the differences between spousal support and child support, there is a big difference between the two. Child support is money paid by one party to the other party to help equalize the household's incomes. You don't want one household where the child has a lifestyle for a $500,000 lifestyle and the other one to have a $20,000 lifestyle. That's a huge difference. So child support's to help equalize so that the child has more of an equal lifestyle at both houses. It's also to reimburse for things such as food, like school lunches, and those types of things, clothing, and sometimes childcare. There's more to go to childcare. Spousal support, or alimony, as you'll also hear it called, is again to help equalize those lifestyles. Similar, like if one was a stay-at-home parent and the other one made all the money, that stay-at-home parent has no income. So having some sort of a spousal support, financial support, would help to equalize those incomes for just a little period of time. Usually there's some sort of a limit on that, but again, there's a lot of variable there. Child support, as has been mentioned, that is a calculator. It takes a lot of things into account. Spousal support is based on the length of the marriage and a need. You got the length of the marriage, a need for it, and the ability to pay. And most of those things can be modified in some fashion or another. Kate, did I miss anything?
I think you covered everything that we wanted to on this slide. I'm sorry, I was answering some questions, so I was a little late jumping on.
No worries.
So a question that we often get is how long does child support go for? And in New Hampshire, it is when child support goes until the child's emancipated. And in New Hampshire, as a general rule of thumb, children are emancipated at age 18. What that means is once your child turns 18, child support would end. And there's no ability to have a judge order someone to contribute to college unless parties have agreed to that between themselves. As Crystal mentioned, the child support is calculated based on a formula, and it's a presumption that that's the starting point. You look at that child support number, and that is most likely the number that's going to come because it's a calculation. Child support, every state has their own child support calculation and have different things that go into it. And every state reviews those child support guidelines every couple of years. And so what goes into it now may change if you come back for a modification, or if your case takes a very long time, or you're in the middle of a child support review cycle. So if there is a change in circumstance or it's been more than 3 years, then you would be entitled to come back and modify that child support. Child support, I often say, it's the right of the child. A lot of times it's difficult to, you run the calculation, there's a number. A lot of times it's difficult to do something extremely different to that number because judges look at that as a right of the child that somebody can't waive. That being said, it is paid to the parent and it's not paid to the child. And sometimes I get people who will say to me, the person paying the child support, I want to know how they spend the money. Child support, as we talk about, is for food, shelter, clothing, basic living expenses. You're not entitled to an accounting of how the person who receives it actually spends it because it's a presumption that's the amount that's needed under the circumstances of your case. Anything you want to add to that one, Crystal?
No, you got it all.
Okay. Did you cover this one?
Sure. So one of the things that goes along with child support is it's child support. It's for food, it's for clothing, it's for those types of things. It does not cover uninsured or uncovered medical expenses. That's a whole separate thing. There's a whole separate topic about that and how parties agree or how the judge determines that those are covered. Generally, other big expensive things that are not those basic food, shelter, clothing type of things is not, those are completely different. Camps, I hate to say it, but camps are usually completely separate. So are childcare. Again, extracurriculars, all that's completely separate. The child support formula, it literally takes into account the gross income from both parents, what they actually make before taxes. They take into account other things such as who's paying health insurance premiums for the children, who's paying child care, and it just runs the formula. I don't know. It's a calculation. The Bureau of Child Support Services actually has a calculator on their website. Anybody can go check it out. You can input the data and then hit calculate, and it will just run the number for you. If you have one child, it's going to be a different number than if you have 5 children involved. It is what it is.
And I often get, so in New Hampshire, what I think is unique, as I mentioned, the Massachusetts as well as New Hampshire. And Massachusetts, one of the factors they take into consideration is the type of parenting schedule when they do that magical calculation. Like Crystal, I don't pretend to understand how it gets made. In New Hampshire, the formula does not take into consideration the type of parenting schedule. There is a new parenting law in New Hampshire that says that it's a presumption that parties should be having approximately a shared parenting schedule, which at a minimum should be like a 60-40 schedule. And so sometimes when I hear people, now we're sharing, so why would my child support be based on more of a 2/3, 1/3? And there is language in the statute that allows us to do something a little bit different, but that is really more of a case-by-case thing and something I wouldn't necessarily want to get into as part of this larger discussion. And then, as mentioned here, the child support can have additional add-ons like the daycare and out-of-pocket medical expenses. Very important to note that so Crystal says that child support is based on your gross income, but you pay that with your after-tax dollars if you're the person paying it. So you don't get a tax deduction. Sometimes that's a little hard for people to quite wrap their brain around. And the person who's receiving it does not pay tax. Your dollar in child support that you're paying is probably costing you like $1.25 because you have to pay that with your after-tax income. And when Renee talks, she will talk about how child support and alimony can be taken into consideration in certain circumstances if you have to refinance or apply for a mortgage loan. But that is something, even though it's not reportable on your tax returns, if you're receiving it, you can still use it to qualify in some circumstances for a loan.
So some of the add-ons that we've been talking about or that I've mentioned a lot of they're considered discretionary. Things like uninsured medical expenses, dental, prescriptions, orthodontia, those are all very big things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they don't fall under what's considered part of child support. So many parties have to consider these as a separate item, whether they're going to split them, whether somebody's going to pay them outright. That is something to consider. They can be considered add-ons, meaning that you can make an agreement. In mediation, we have had parties who have come to arrangements where they've agreed to lower child support paid by one party because the other party is going to pay more of these uninsured or add-on items. Childcare, I've had one party say, let's lower my child support payment because I'm going to cover all of childcare. And in some cases, paying the childcare is more expensive than their share of child support. So in most cases, in mediation, there is some flexibility. Travel expenses, those are, again, separate from child support. But again, as it says here, mediation, we have a lot more flexibility in how these things are handled because we're doing it. We still have to follow all the laws. We still have to follow all the rules. But our goal is to reach these agreements outside of a judge's order. So the parties have more flexibility in what agreements they're reaching and how they're getting there. And 529 plans, cost of driving, that's another big one that pops up for teenagers, whether they're going to share that cost, whether one party is going to pay that cost and somebody else is going to cover something else. All those things balance out. What else did I miss, Kate?
No, I just want to touch on the mediation point that you make that what I describe as if you're in court, a judge can only do inside the box. If you're in mediation, you can't be really far outside the box, but you can be outside the box to some extent and be more creative than what a judge can do, which is usually more appropriate for your family. And I'm going to lose my train of thought. Barb, did you want to say something while I try and remember where I was going with
Yeah, I was just going to say, I always encourage clients to put together a separate schedule of all kids' expenses. Kids are very expensive, club sports, camps. It really adds up. And then getting these things hammered out during the settlement too and addressed as part of mediation is also really important because otherwise you're going to be post-settlement. No one has to pay for it. So it's just really easy. You're better off having a no surprises than after the fact, all of a sudden now talking about who's going to pay for camp. And ultimately, if it's not in your agreement, they don't have to do it. So it's just good to get out there. And again, I also would emphasize that this is one of the main reasons you do want to avoid court is having more flexibility when you're trying to arrange a settlement. That is definitely, there's a whole host of reasons for not wanting to litigate, but this should definitely be on the list. It's just more flexibility in the support area.
I found my train of thought. What I wanted to add was that by reaching agreement, it can be a lot more encompassing than something a judge will do. So sometimes if a judge makes a decision, you might get a 4-page judgment if you're lucky. Whereas a mediated agreement is going to be probably twice as long, if not longer, especially when you have parenting issues. It is not going to be detailed and go into all the things that are really helpful for people to be successful co-parents once they're divorced.
Yep.
Okay, we talked a lot about child support. The other component that we want to talk about was spousal support, also called alimony. So if you are in a litigated process in New Hampshire, you might have a temporary orders hearing. And at that point, there might be temporary alimony. That's going to be different than when you have a final decree and you are potentially paying alimony post-divorce. Generally, child support is modifiable, meaning just like child support, if there's a change in circumstance, either one of you can come back in and modify that child support. Sometimes, unfortunately, I do see this a lot where people enter into alimony orders. They might be in their 40s when they get divorced. And then 10 years goes down, person's been paying alimony, and now through no fault of their own, they've been let go. And yes, age discrimination does happen. And sometimes they can't always get back to the same type of career or income that they were at. So that's certainly our basis to modify that. In New Hampshire, we have a statute that addresses child or alimony, and essentially the maximum duration is 50% of the length of the marriage. It also would terminate upon either person passing away and then also potentially reaching Social Security full retirement age. If somebody were to have an early retirement, at that point, you really probably have to come back in and seek a modification. Things like either party's death, and also I forgot to mention the person who is receiving it, if they remarry, that would terminate it. Those are automatic terminations. Things like a change in job or a change in retirement status, that's something where you actually have to go back to the court. You can certainly also reach out to your former spouse and see if they're willing to mediate that issue as well. I know that sometimes sounds like, why would my spouse want to mediate? But that's saving you money from going to court and actually litigating. So sometimes that's worthwhile. And then self-employment and tax return. So self-employment, I know there was a couple questions in the Q&A that I was answering, and I would invite Crystal to tell me if she has different thoughts on this. But generally so support, whether it's alimony or child support, should be based on current income. If somebody is self-employed, sometimes that means they fluctuate year to year. And so usually in those situations, I look at an average of income for maybe about 3 years or so. The other potentially less desirable outcome is an annual exchange of information and then some type of recalculation. But depending upon the dynamics in your relationship, that may mean that that's causing a lot more headaches than it's worth, because there's a constant exchange of information and then figuring out what that calculation is and what happens if you don't agree on that calculation. How are we going to address that? The other thing I just want to point out about if tax returns aren't actually reflecting income, that's where you go in and bring somebody like Barb in as a CDFA to help you with those tax returns and figure out a good analysis. I think that's the kind of thing that's perfect for somebody like Barb.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
I love tax returns and looking at them and finding I'll call them a treasure trove of information. So bring them on. I love tax returns.
Okay. So differences between temporary and long-term spousal support. So you have temporary, meaning it's only for a very short period of time. Long-term tends to go years. Again, as Kate mentioned, there is a maximum that you can go, half the length of a marriage. So it could be that you have a stay-at-home parent and who's just been out of the workforce for a while and just they'll end up taking a job, but they need money to get themselves on their feet. That would be more temporary versus somebody who has to go back to school, who has no skills. Let me rephrase this. Everybody has skills. It's more of marketable skills for the area that they want to go into. Sometimes that does require a little bit of education, and sometimes one party might be disabled. There are reasons to have longer term spousal support. When does it switch? And how long does it last? We've chatted about this a few times. Again, that goes back to those changing of circumstances. If it was meant to be temporary and those circumstances have changed, it could very well change to long term. What do you need to show if you're looking to qualify for a home purchase? Should I get back to work now? Long-term marriage, how does it affect me? And a 9.5 or a 10.5 year marriage. Generally, if it's over 5 years, generally if it's 10 years or more, it's long-term. If it's less than 10 years, it's generally considered a short-term marriage. So that will obviously change the amount of child support, alimony, and spousal support. Kate, what am I missing in regards to those other questions? Qualifying for a home purchase. Should I get back to
I'm going to let
work?
Renee deal with that question.
I'm like, Steph, generally, again, spousal support goes back to the need and the ability to pay. Those are the big pieces. So if you haven't been working, you're likely going to end up having to start looking, bare minimum.
As Crystal mentioned, it's usually need and ability to pay. Sometimes we do start talking about earning capacity. I just had a case that I settled where one of the parties had been out of work for a period of time, and she acknowledged she should be working. And so we agreed to base support, treating her as though she had certain level of income when we did that calculation. And then there was going to be an annual exchange of information going after that. Court does have the ability to say you should, if you're unemployed or, out of the workforce, that you could be treated with something. I'm even seeing courts these days at a bare minimum saying you could be out there earning minimum wage.
We've had that, yeah.
And on that, which quite honestly is not unreasonable. Duration of the marriage is important to take into consideration. The standard of living during the marriage. Where did you guys live? What did you do for vacations and entertainment? And what does it look like now? Now, you talk to anybody, there is definitely going to be a difference in your standard of living once you are divorced because you're taking the same amount of income and now trying to support two households, but it shouldn't be such a drastic reduction in your standard of living. And then there's a mention about a post-divorce budget, which I probably would let Barb talk about because I know she mentioned about the ugly B word earlier today. And then I think the most important thing on this slide is talking about life insurance. So when somebody has a financial obligation agreement, whether that's spousal support or child support, you want to make sure that there's some kind of security, usually in the form of life insurance, that if somebody were to pass before their financial obligations are done, there is some amount of money that's coming to that surviving spouse to make sure they can continue to make some of those payments that they're no longer going to be receiving.
And I can't emphasize enough the budget. I know it sounds crazy, and I've had more clients say to me, I just didn't know it would be this important. I just guessed on some of these things. And then it really does, in many cases, it can be very important. And it's also helpful, as Robin will talk about, in knowing if you're going to be okay with the settlement that you're getting. It's really important to fine tune that budget and see what your new life is going to be like.
And then, as Kate mentioned earlier, spousal support automatically ends if the receiving spouse remarries. That's a big one. It could end if there's a cohabitation, but again, that changes those dynamics. And then it again goes back to, has there been a change in the need and the ability to pay? And then taxes. Taxes are always a topic. The person receiving the alimony does not pay federal income taxes on it, and the person paying it does not receive a tax deduction. But again, CPA, very important. They're the official person on that one.
So I think we went over some of this about modification. So similar to child support, similar to child support, alimony can be also modifiable in the future. And then there is an interplay between child support and alimony, and that it is possible that there could be both child support and alimony payments, because if you are a dependent spouse, as we said, alimony is for the spouse, child support is for the child. So it is possible that there could be both. Child support can't be waived, as I previously mentioned, because that is the right of the child. But you can do deviations, as Crystal was mentioning, maybe changing that slightly because somebody is willing to pay more in the way of certain expenses. And then I think we also mentioned that if there's primary custody or 50-50, that may impact the child support in one way, but it may still be appropriate for there to be alimony paid. Before we jump into the financial section, I just wanted to go over a couple of the questions that were submitted in advance. I think it might be helpful for people. One question was about how an annual bonus is taken into consideration. And generally, it's best practice to calculate child support on your base income, because that's what you're guaranteed to receive every month. And then when you do that child support calculation, there is a percentage at the bottom that shows you what percentage of the person's gross income is being used. And usually what we do is that same percentage is then applied to bonus income if and when it's actually received. I know we talked about when alimony, child support, and then there's a question about income and support versus assets and whether or not how pension plays into that. And I think this isn't a seminar about assets, but I just want to very briefly say there is division of assets and then there's support. They don't really interplay. Sometimes, again, when we're out of court through mediation, we can be more creative. And sometimes we do talk about, especially for older people who are going through divorce, what does post-retirement income look like and how can we equalize that? That is something that I think may be important to take into consideration. That's all I had. I don't know if you have anything else, Crystal.
Nope, I think you hit all the high points on that.
Okay, perfect.
I see finance. Yes. So again, these are all things that we've been talking about. Really, I think just to come organized, bring data. All these things are outlined in the Rule 1.25A disclosure, tax returns, banking information, pay stubs, Social Security benefits can even be really important, and all medical information. If you have a special needs child, that should really all bring all that to the mediator, to your legal team. And again, I think also too, it's really helpful to come, especially for your attorney or mediator, to write down the facts of the marriage. I know when I'm working with clients, I'll put together something like that for the mediator or the attorney. It just helps them have a little summary, and it might be something that they eventually would have to give to a mediator. I think writing down kind of your version and just getting it on paper of what happened, what you've contributed, how you've lived, I think is really important. 5 things you should know about every divorce. Marital property is half of everything you acquire during the course of the marriage. Each state has their rules about what is considered marital. I know even in New Hampshire, it's slightly different than Massachusetts. It's fair to assume that you're entitled to half of everything. Even if someone works, a lot of times they'll be like, I earned it. It doesn't matter. Whatever retirements, doesn't matter whose legal name it is. If you acquired it during the marriage, then it should be a marital asset. Again, the key, if you stay out of court, everything becomes negotiable. It's really, I can't encourage you enough to use a team approach, like the team that you have in front of you, to do your best to stay out of court, because they'll just have so much more flexibility. And you can really agree, it's your rules when you go to mediation. It's important that you get your asset division right. Once you sign on the dotted line, you'd have to go back to court to get it redivision, unless of course there was some type of fraud or something like that. But again, you would still have to go back to court. So it's really important that you get it right the first time. Robin, do you want to?
Yep. Sorry,
Talk
that's
about-
me. Hi, everyone, again. So yeah, I'm going to talk about planning for life after divorce. You've settled your divorce, and now is the task of kind of creating that next chapter for yourself, personally and financially. And it's a huge adjustment, as some of the ladies have mentioned tonight. Not only is it a highly vulnerable time, because it generally comes with a lot of stress, a lot of change, and a lot of emotion. But it also, there's so many shifting parts and maybe so many things that you don't know. If you've never managed finances before on your own, or taxes, or been in charge of what was the budget pre-divorce is now cash flow post-divorce in my world. I like to call it cash flow because it's a little more aspirational. So there's a lot going on, and it's really important in that highly vulnerable time not to make big decisions if you can avoid them, to really take the time to get adjusted to your new financial picture. So the inflows and outflows of your cash flow, you spent all that time kind of building a case for what you need. And so that piece should be a little bit easier to understand. But how does the money actually end up in your account? And what bills do you have to pay now? So just getting a handle on all of those things will help you gain some confidence and a feeling of well-being around your financial situation. I talked about getting divorced financially, but what I mean by that is changing all the accounts to be in your name that were awarded to you in the divorce. So that can be through quadros, which are a tool to get retirement accounts into your name. It could be moving joint assets into your individual name, IRA assets, or those retirement assets that might need to be shifted. So there's a lot going on in the house. Whatever happens with the house, that needs to be retitled. So getting divorced financially is a big deal, but it should be outlined in your divorce decree. And working with a financial advisor certainly can help. Barb and I work together on a lot of that. I know that Michelle, the divorce coach, helps some of her clients. So she can talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Taking that first 3 months, 6 months to fully understand your financial picture and what you own now before you're making big decisions about lifestyle changes, if possible. You have that stage of adjusting to your new normal, understanding your financial picture, and then you can really move on to rebuilding and strengthening your financial foundation and looking at your life options with a financial plan. So rebuilding could be building up an emergency fund. Maybe it's finding a career and having employment. It could be investing your dollars more efficiently. So there's a lot that goes into that, and working with someone to help you think through all of your options is a critical component of building that financial foundation. And then we have knowing the impact of the division and post-divorce. So I do think there's, again, a lot in that divorce decree. And so knowing what your life will look like on day one of your divorce. So are you getting spousal support? Are you getting child support? And how that might change 10 years from now. When do those things end? So just plotting that out in a financial plan is really empowering to help you understand how your finances will change and what you need to do. It gives you time to plan. Should I save more now because some of those things are ending? And action steps that you can take to secure that financial future for yourself. Not all money is the same. We talked about taxes pre and the divorce planning stage, and post-divorce is important as well. A lot of the money that you get will have different tax consequences. I'm not going to go through that here. We have a big August webinar where we're talking about a lot of those things, but just knowing that your different accounts have different tax consequences, and you might not be able to take out of your IRA on day one if you're under age 59 and a half without a penalty is an important factor. So again, working with someone who can take you through the rules and help you understand the different types of accounts that you might have is a really critical part of planning for your future. Knowing the tax implications of property divisions is around sale of a house. There are some exemptions on gains for that. So again, I'm not going to go through that here, but selling investments has tax consequences. So really understanding I don't know if you will have a change in your tax status from joint to single. So that has some consequences too in your tax planning. So a big part of what we work with our clients is plotting out that tax planning of how is that changing for you this year? How will it change for you next year? And what are some ways that we can minimize taxes for you and how we take money out of your accounts? And then we have the taking care of post-divorce items. I think Michelle wanted to talk about these last four a little bit for you tonight. Thank you.
Yep. During our coaching, during, and now we're post-divorce, it's time to take care of some of the items that are in your agreement. You could have a quadro, which is I think we spoke about already, the qualified domestic relations order related to 401k and who do you hire? Do you have the information? And just supporting you through that uncertain time of getting that done. The co-parenting, you put the schedule in place. We talked about communication. It's always key. Setting new boundaries. Like I said, you have a new relationship. They're not your best friend anymore. You might be friendly, but they're not your best friend anymore, most likely. Thinking about dating. What does that look like? How do you feel about it? How do you want to approach it? A lot of people say finding themselves again, getting back to who you were maybe years ago prior to the marriage, finding new hobbies, getting out there to social events. I've even heard people that had to give up some of their religious, going to church or going to a certain church, finding new places to go to church because you weren't allowed to go to that one anymore. Maybe you lost some of your friends because they were friends with the other spouse. So planning for life after divorce, career, while we set goals during coaching, what your life looked like, what you wanted your life to look like, in a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, did your agreement say you have to refinance or sell the house 2 years from now, so we can continue to work together to reach all of your goals and make sure you're staying on track and getting everything done and still using all the right resources on this team on the call day to get all of those items completed.
All right, the marital home. So, one of the biggest assets that comes down to a lot of divorce situations is really just knowing what your home is worth. And a lot of the time, I'm dealing with a lot of the attorneys very early on because a lot of the negotiations comes around with what's the dollar amount that their home is worth and or any investment property. So, I always say to anyone that is starting thinking at all about divorce, the earlier you have any of us involved is the better, especially when it comes down to a lot of these conversations. The earlier you have them with your soon to be ex spouse, that you guys are at least have some communications that is, I would say, on good terms before things possibly could get turn a little bit on that. The sooner we have those conversations, the better. So, definitely a lot of conversations come around whether one spouse is going to keep the home and one's going to, so to say, buy out the other. If there is still a mortgage on the property, Renee can definitely speak to more of that. But a lot of the conversations need to really be around if one spouse is going to stay by the other. Does someone need to go find housing? Does it come down to just the house needs to be sold and both parties need to go find housing altogether? So sometimes bef- before my involvement, there's already been a party that's already moved out into some type of a rental agreement, a rental arrangement, excuse me. And then we are now looking to get the home sold. But a lot of the conversations before you even think about, I want to buy my spouse, I want to stay, is can you actually afford it? We've seen it. Renee and I can attest to it many times that they've have all these agreements in place that I'm going to stay and I'm going to keep the home. Everything's signed, sealed, delivered, and lo and behold, they actually can't afford to actually stay in the home. So it's scary and it happens. Like I said, the earlier you have the conversations with us, the better, just to make sure if you are looking to do that, that you actually can afford that. And you just have the numbers that you need in place for that. I can do a market analysis and provide some information for you on that. And again, like you've said before, if someone comes down to selling capital gains, again, you do talk to your tax accountant on all of those situations that come in play for sure. If a party is going to be, again, buying the home, like I've already mentioned, certain things that come into the factor. A lot of times we're coming into it, things have been a little challenging, and sometimes there's been some deferred maintenance to the property. So a lot of the times we're having attorneys involved if there's some money that needs to be spent to just in terms of the property itself, that comes into play on the value of the property. If, some just the lawn, the exterior, painting, mate is typical standard maintenance items. Just some of those are just left to the wayside because let's face it, this can be consuming. And some of those things just haven't been done. We have to keep that top of mind when we're coming to if someone's going to be buying the home, et cetera, or we're just trying to put some type of market value around that, or we are going to be trying to prepare the house for the market. But there's a lot of people that can be involved to really make sure that if someone actually is going to be buying the home, we have the mortgage, we have the lender, or excuse me, the lender, we have the title company, we have the attorneys, making sure that everything's going to be done properly. And like I mentioned before, obviously affording the house if you're going to be buying the property out from your spouse. Moving on to the next slide is if we're actually coming down to, which is very common, of course, it is determined that we need to sell the home. So like I mentioned, I will come in, do a market analysis on the property, come up with a market range on what I see the value of that property is worth. And sometimes we know how things are going to be divvied out on the financial side, but I'm really working with both parties. And a lot of the times I am the person that is speaking about the home versus the house that we're selling. And I'll be the biggest communicator between both parties because sometimes they're not communicating directly. It's either between the attorneys and or it's myself. I deal with a lot of divorce situations and can really work well with both parties on here's our end goal is to sell the home. What do we need to do that? And X, Y, and Z needs to be done. So it's really just helping them prepare themselves for that. And also just what type of market are we in, right? We've been in a seller's market for the longest running historical cycle ever. However, we are in a bit of a shifting market at the moment. So it's all about timing. And we know that sometimes divorces could take time. And when is the best time if we know that we're going to be selling the home? Are we doing it during the divorce? Are we doing it post the divorce? If there's kids in play, we get it. It's a lot of different things that are changing. And if we're selling the home, do you need to go find something? Are you looking to go into a rental? Are you looking to go into a purchase? And sometimes that can be challenging depending on what the price budget is if you're going to be buying something, right? We're in our state here when the average median sales price is over $500,000, that kind of comes into play depending on if you need to go find something and incomes, et cetera, is a lot lesser than that. Anywho, so that's why it's a lot of these conversations, the earlier we have them, really just lets us to be able to set up and set some expectations on how this is going to really and going to pan out. A lot of the times too, like I mentioned, if some things have been deferred for maintenance to the property, we really need to attend to that. We need to have some financials and monies put into the property. We need to have the attorneys involved on who's paying for what and who's documenting and how that's going to be dispersed on the back end. So again, it's really having those conversations up front ahead of time. So we just make sure that everything, all proceeds, et cetera, get split as they are needed to be at that time. Contingencies, we're starting to see those come back in the mix, right? Like I mentioned, we're in a bit of a shifting market. Or before many years ago, houses were just you put it on the market for whatever price and it flies. That's not the case. When we're seeing that bit of that shift, it's we need to have some of those realistic conversations with our sellers and our clients so they can set their expectations for when a house goes on the market, what's our days on the market look like, which is ticking up. We are still in the kind of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New England area. We're still in our sellers market where other parts of the country are really feeling it already. We have seen other parts of the country that they have seen quite a shift in the market a lot more than we have here. It's just preparing for that and having that understanding and have that conversation so we can plan, hey, listen, let's sell the house. Let's put the house on the market now versus let's wait a year or two when we are finalized the divorce. So again, conversations about just having professionals involved as early on in the process just really sets you up to be in the best financial situation. So, and I think that's it. Thank you. And over to Renee.
Thanks, Laura. So mortgages, I'm going to reiterate what Laura said because it's super important. You're splitting your assets, right? You need to know the value of that asset. So the sooner you call Laura, the sooner you call your financial people, the sooner you call your lender, the better. The more information you have to make the process that much easier for you. So when we're talking about the house and the mortgage and what are my options? Typically, one spouse has an idea that they would like to keep the house. Usually it's the house where the kids are going to stay and one of the spouses would like to stay there with the children. And the first question that I get asked, can I qualify for a mortgage on my income alone? That's a big question, right? So as you're trying to determine what your options are, right? Okay, if you want to keep the house, we have to look at, will the other spouse be removed from the mortgage? How do we do that? Is my income enough? One of the items that we will look at is if you're going to be receiving support, so child support and or alimony, both can be used as income to qualify you for a mortgage. So there's some rules around it. So again, you want to talk to your lender early. But we can use that as income to qualify you. The sooner we know the numbers and we can start running some scenarios for you so that you'll know what your options are. Can we keep the house? Do we have to sell it? Can I buy a new house? What does that look like? the documents. What documents do I need to provide? So any mortgage, whether you're a joint 2-person mortgage or a single-person mortgage or a 5-person mortgage, same documents are required. Your pay information, sometimes your tax returns, depending if you're self-employed. You will need your bank information to show that you've got the funds either to purchase or as reserves if you're refinancing. And we'll need some IDs. We'll need your homeowner's insurance information. So standard documents that any mortgage. And if we're using support to qualify you, there's additional documentation, bank statements, how the money is received, when it's received. And if we are using support to qualify you for a mortgage, we're going to need a copy of the final divorce agreement. So a couple of things to keep in mind there. Will my credit be affected by the divorce? So in and of itself, divorce has nothing to do with your credit score. However, if there's a struggle to pay the bills during the divorce or after the divorce, that's where your credit can take a hit, right? We see it a lot where bills get forgotten or there's not enough money to pay them if the settlement hasn't been finalized yet. So you want to be mindful of what debts are in your name. You want to make sure that you're looking at your credit and you understand what's your responsibility. If your name is on it, it's your responsibility. Even if your final divorce settlement says that the other spouse is responsible for that payment, if it's in your name and they don't pay it, your credit is the one that's going to get dinged. Divorce in and of itself does not cause your credit to go down, but some of the circumstances around divorce could affect your credit score. And of course, your credit score is important if you are looking to get a mortgage. Should I refinance my existing mortgage after divorce? So that depends. Now I sound like an attorney. That depends. So we're going to look at all your options as far as refinancing or purchasing a new home, or it could even be renting for a time. Knowing the value of the house, knowing what the payment might look like, knowing what you could sell the house for and what maybe rent would look like. So knowing all of the options will help you determine whether refinancing is something that you should do. There's also something called a mortgage assumption, where if both spouses are on the mortgage and you're looking to take over that mortgage, the lender allows you to assume the existing mortgage in your name only and keep your existing interest rate and the existing term left of the loan. So if you've got a 3% interest rate and 26 years left on the loan, it would be transferred from both spouses to the one spouse. Now, lenders don't always allow it. You have to check with your individual loan servicer to understand if they will allow an assumption. You still have to qualify for it. They're still going to require all of the documents as if it were a brand new loan. They're not just going to say, oh, sure, we'll take spouse 1 off and spouse 2 can take it over. And they're going to make sure spouse 2 qualifies, whether it's a refinance or an assumption. In either case, you'll have to qualify for that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, qualifying for a mortgage, we can use support to qualify you with some rules. There's some, depending on what loan program, there's a certain length of time. So you want to make sure that you understand these rules before your final divorce settlement agreement is made, right? So if your divorce agreement says once the agreement is final, you have 60 days to refinance your mortgage, and you come to me and we need child support to qualify you, only we can't do that within 60 days because we have to show you've received it for 6 months, right? So again, just talk to your lender early. I highly recommend a CDLP. We work in divorce every single day. Not every lender is familiar with the rules of divorce. So just make sure you're talking with us beforehand, before you sign that final agreement, so that what the outcome you're looking for, we want to make sure that we can provide that. And lastly, credit is super important. Whether you're refinancing whether you're assuming the mortgage, whether you're selling the house and purchasing another home, whether you're renting, your credit score is going to come into play. So you want to be mindful. A couple of things to keep in mind. You want to pull your credit early in the process because we want to see what debts are in your name. You can get a free credit report online, free credit report, annual report. I forget what the website is, but you can Google it and find it. Your credit cards also will provide reports. Credit Karma is another one. It's free. You can go on there and access a copy of your report. You want to see what debts are in your name. Over time, I know I forget, was my car in my name or did we both sign for that car? I don't remember. Am I an authorized user on the credit card? So you want to know what debts are in your name and you want to make sure that they're paid on time. A late payment is what is really going to hurt your credit scores. Okay. So pull your credit, take a look at it, see what's in your name, make sure the debts are being paid on time, and keep the balances owed to roughly 30% of the available credit. So if you have a credit card that's got a $1,000 credit limit, you want to make sure the balance on that card stays below 300, so 30% of the 1,000. That's going to get you the best scores for your credit by keeping that balance low. When we max out credit cards, it really affects your score negatively. And debt to income ratio. That's a ratio that a lender will use to qualify you for a mortgage. So that's the most important piece. Your credit score will directly affect what programs are available to you as well as your interest rate, but your debt to income ratio comes into play as well. So simply put, your debt to income ratio is we take your monthly debts and we divide it by your monthly income. So we're going to use your credit report and let's say there's a $300 car payment and a $100 credit card, your minimum payment on the card. So $400 a month. And then we add your mortgage to it, another $2,500. And we take that total and we divide it by your monthly income. And depending on the loan program, there's a certain level maximum that we can go to. So knowing your DTI is going to help us determine what loan programs are available for you. So all of these pieces are super important to keep in mind. And again, just to reiterate, when we're dividing the assets, we need to know what that asset is worth. So speaking to someone like Laura to get that value, and then talking to a lender like myself, where we can put those numbers together to show you what your options are. We'll put together a whole report for you to show you if I refinanced and had to buy my spouse out, we can run some scenarios, what those numbers would look like. We can run some scenarios to show you if there's support, what will that look like to add to the mortgage? And then we can also look at what does it look like if we're going to sell and purchase something else? What can we qualify you for? All good stuff. So I'm going to invite the rest of the crew back on. And the link that you see here is for our concierge service. So they will be reaching out to you, but if you'd like to reach out to them and you want to schedule a call with them, you can do that here. They will also introduce you to any of the professionals on the panel tonight speaking if you'd like to set up a time with them. Excellent. All good information. I think if we don't have any other questions, I think we'll wrap it up for the night.